least?
It released today.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll have to listen to that.
Yeah.
Get my other validation in.
It's funny you bring that up,
Alex,
because
I wish I had known that before we started this session.
Yeah. I think at some point I talk about how there were times where you've said things that I didn't necessarily agree with, and how that's normal and stuff like that. But I was like, I wonder if Dr. Steve's going to listen to this and be like, what do you mean you disagree with me? Yeah. So there was something that I did want to talk about with this being a new, technically it's going to be 2023.
Yeah.
I've been spending a lot of time thinking about stuff relating to our conversation in Google, the Google Maps conversation.
That was like one of our first, right?
Yeah. I think the last couple weeks, probably the last 2 weeks, have been sort of challenging in this regard. Challenging. It's been sort of exhausting emotionally. The end of the year is kind of tough for me, because I find myself, like most people, doing the okay, what's everything I accomplished? What's everything I want to accomplish? And that's just this general idea of okay, well, another year's gone. What do you have to show for it? And that can be really tough. Especially the questions that come up are do I know what I'm doing? Am I heading in the right direction? Did I really get that much done? Do I have anything to show for it? It's like that. Those questions are kind of on repeat, on a loop for the last 2 weeks. And it's really exhausting. I think what compounds it is when I was younger, I was like, okay, I got some leeway. I got some runway, right? I'm only 23, no one really expects too much of a 23-year-old. But now it's with each passing year, it's I've been spending a lot of time thinking about the fact that I'm an adult. And it sounds weird saying it because there are a lot of times I have to remind myself, hey, you're a grown-ass man. You're not a kid. You're not still figuring things out. You are an established professional. You should have a family. A lot of people your age have kids, homes, careers. It's just, it can get really exhausting to think about all that. So it's been hard.
Yeah. So to me, you're going back to the shoulds. What should I have accomplished by this time? Whose rules? And so the moment you said, I've been thinking a lot about this, and people get to this place in their life and they should have done. I'm like, okay, who's saying that? Where's that come from?
It comes from everywhere. Social media. It comes from my family. No one explicitly ever. I think the most I hear it, word for word, is usually my parents, but they don't say it that starkly. They'll be say things how much money did you make? Or how many clients you got? What's your plan to grow the business? And it's delivered in a way where it's to go back to our last session, it doesn't sound very much like a scientist.
Yeah, okay.
It sounds more like a lawyer. And that's tough.
You should be at this place.
Yeah.
You should be making this much. You should have accomplished this much. Why do you only have 1.3 children?
I'm going to share, this is a crazy story. So my grandpa, rest in peace, he was a really kind of iconic man. He's just the best way I can describe him, I'm reading a book on Andrew Carnegie, and I just get lots of those vibes of just he was very entrepreneurial. He grew up with nothing, was dirt poor, grew up in the Depression, and then slowly built his way up to, providing for his family and all that stuff. And was quite successful. Not ridiculously successful, but hey, successful guy. And I'll never forget, I was 26. And I was really excited because I was working at a job at an ad agency in town that I was really excited to be working at, and they had just given me a raise, a big raise. And I was telling my grandpa how excited I was about it, and he was really excited for me. He's like, "That's great, you know. I'll love to hear that." And he stopped. He's like, "So you're making 6 figures then, right?" And I'll never forget, I just stopped and I was like, no, because I was not. I was making half of that, you know, but it still felt like a lot to me, and I was still really excited. Or it wasn't half, it was, I forget what it was. But I'll just never forget the like look at his face when he was like, "So you're making this much money, right?" And I think that sort of has been the kind of like running thing. It's like whatever success I've had, there's always that follow-up question that's like, "Well, so that means you're at this level, right?" And yeah, I kind of carry that feeling with me, especially around this time of year. The new year is particularly hard for me because I'm like, I feel the need to categorize, like, okay, what are the, all the shoulds come out. They come just bursting through the door. That's like, picture like 100 nails and they're just all getting hammered. 100 hammers, each one nails a different should. So yeah,
that's a lot to digest, a lot to track,
a
lot to live up to.
And I hope I doesn't sound like I'm disparaging my grandpa in any way, because I love the guy, and I think that I struggle with this idea of like what I'm expected to accomplish, or what I don't even know what I expect. I feel like I have an understanding of what I expect and want to accomplish for myself, like what motivates me, what excites me. But sometimes I don't even know if that belongs to me, or, did I adopt that from other people and stuff like that.
Yeah, my sense is that you're not alone in this. That there's a lot of people who kind of get to the end of this, the end of a year, and kind of evaluate. And there's things that we have to do. We have to declare income to our, we do a tax return.
Yeah.
That's one measure of how well we are doing, quote unquote. How we have it measured up, maybe.
Yeah. And this kind of, again, there's a lot. So I take stock every year of like, hey, I have a annual plan. So I just created my plan for 2023. And it's not all like career focus. It's like personal goals and stuff like that. And for 2022, like I definitely hit, I'd say like 50% of my goals or whatever. But there are things that I still am unhappy with. And I've been, I think, stuck in that feeling of unhappiness and like wanting to point the finger, like, well, what circumstances, who's not making this easier for me, or like who's not making me feel better about this.
So Alex, how will you know when you're content?
I'll just feel it. I won't be.
What do you mean?
A good example is like, I can tell, I know a good day when I feel it, because the easiest thing I can point to is when I sing or hum when I drive home or drive to or home from work.
It's a marker.
Yeah.
Like,
or if I'm
humming on the way home, or singing along with the radio on my way home.
When I wake up in the morning and I'm humming, it's been a good day. I know that sounds very, very specific, but I compare it to like, if it was a spectrum of like, okay, how loud is the self-talk? How loud are the shoulds? And I will be content when the shoulds don't feel as loud, or when they are there, but I can just say, yeah, hello, shoulds. Nice to see you again. But doesn't mean anything. Just a bunch of shoulds doing their thing. The cacophony of shoulds. Why do you ask that question?
Uh,
Because you kind of like had a little bit of a smirk when you asked it. So I was like, is there something else going on there?
Because my experience of you is that you're off, is that in our conversations, you often talk about being unfulfilled or like not measuring up in some way.
Yeah.
And so like, well, how would you know if you did measure up? Like, and what would, like, do you get to die then? Do you get to check out? Do you get to give yourself a break? I mean, how?
I would get to give myself a break.
So what would that even look like? More humming than shoulding?
Yeah.
So when the humming
like
drowns
less,
out the shoulds?
Yeah, less beating myself up.
What if the shoulds also contribute to you getting up in the morning and getting after it?
That's the great, exhausting irony. I understand that there is some good there. Because without the shoulds are a weird way in my motivation.
In therapy, we talk about, you shouldn't should on yourself.
yeah.
And how that sounds, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, in some ways this kind of reminds me a little bit of the conversation we had at one time about the difference between guilt and shame, right? Guilt can be a motivator. I feel like I'm not measuring up to my own personal ethic. Mm-hmm. I let myself down. I let other people that I care about down. That's a guilt thing. Oh, I'm such a loser. I did, that's the shame part. I don't think wallowing in shame helps, but I do think that guilt can help. I need to change. It can be a corrective kind of a thing. So what is a should? What is an obligation? What is a response to a personal ethic that I have? Like, are there some shoulds that I take on because that's how I want to be known?
Because of the guilt.
That's not so much the guilt, but I want to be this kind of a person. Yeah. And so that means I should behave in these ways. Mm-hmm. I want to be a trustworthy person, and therefore I'm going to only speak the truth so that people can trust me. So I put myself in a position to be trusted by others. And I believe that, then the next step is I believe that being trusted by others is going to lead to more business, it's going to lead to better relationships, It's going to lead to more influence in my kids' lives, those kinds of things.
It reminds me of when we talked about Google Maps, which is like being motivated by, it's kind of like being motivated by things that bring me joy or feel true to my authentic self versus being like shamed into things. Right? Like pushing towards something versus being dragged towards something are two different ways of experiencing the same thing.
Yeah.
And if I can, spending more time being like, well, what do I want?
But I ask the question because I think that you often feel uncontented. Is that a word?
I don't know.
Not content.
I know what you're trying to say, though.
Incontinent.
Does that mean?
I think that's what it is.
And doesn't that mean you can't go to the bathroom or something?
You just go all the time.
Yeah, you go all the time.
It depends.
Yeah, depends. Was that a pun? Okay.
There you go.
Well done. I do feel unfulfilled. Yes. But I think, again, because 2023, the new year rolls around and I'm like, I know I want to do these things. And they're big things and they're great things that they excite me. But I also acknowledge the fact that they're hard to do. It's not like I'm setting goals of like, I want to do 15 push-ups every morning. Uh-huh. It's like, hey, I want to win an Oscar. Like, some of those things are just going to be outside of your control. And I think having lofty kind of goals and ambitions, I fall into this trap of being like, well, I haven't gotten any closer to them, so clearly I'm a dumbass,
Maybe. I don't know. I like this conversation. What's coming up for me is you think about people like, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who, wears the T-shirt, hardest worker in the gym, hardest person in the, hardest worker in the room. Kobe Bryant, who, if he has a bad game, he stays and he practices and he's up at 4 a.m. and he gets after it. And he's like, because he's driven by, I don't want to just be in the NBA. I don't want to just
be the greatest.
I want to be the very greatest. Not just the greatest I can be, but the greatest that anybody has ever been. And And so I know that there are people out there like that, and that comes with a certain cost,
100%.
right? And the rewards are probably commensurate with the kind of cost. Like the more that you're willing to sacrifice to be that best, then the payoff is greater. But there's a lot of us who are like, I want to be good.
Yeah.
But I don't need to be up at 4
Yeah.
shooting foul shots. I don't I don't need all those muscles. I want so my question to you is, are you on the Kobe Bryant, Dwayne the Rock Johnson,
I feel
Oprah
like
Winfrey part of the continuum, or are you somewhere on the other end?
I feel like I'm too well adjusted to be on the Kobe Bryant, the reason I say that is I remember watching the Michael Jordan, The Last Dance series. And my big takeaway, I don't know if we've talked about this here.
Mm-mm.
My big takeaway was like, man, Michael Jordan's a lonely, lonely dude. And I'll never forget there was a segment where he was talking about his relationship with his brother and his father.
Mm.
And his brother was very handy, and so was his dad. And they would work on things with their hands together.
Mm.
And Michael would try to get involved, and his dad would be like, you don't know what you're doing. Like, you suck at this. And Michael, in the documentary, is like, at that point, I told myself, I'm going to be great at something.
Mm.
And then it all clicked for me. It was like, this guy's entire career was built upon feeling inadequate and being like, I'm going to conquer this feeling of inadequacy.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And, maybe I'm reading this completely wrong. But I think that I totally agree that in order to be great, the sacrifices you have to make are ridiculous. Or, ridiculous to me, not ridiculous to those who make them, obviously. Worthwhile. I want to raise a family. I want to be a good husband. I want to be involved in my kid's life.
You want to be the Michael Jordan of husbands? The Michael Jordan of dads?
No, because then I wouldn't have a career. I want to just be balanced. But I want to be, I look at my favorite directors, right? There's this guy, Edgar Wright, who, he's a very talented director. You're familiar with Quentin Tarantino?
No.
He's very similar to Quentin Tarantino in the sense he's very stylized, not nearly as much violence.
Lots of blood.
Yeah, not nearly as much blood, but like the same appreciation for pop culture and like they're very similar. But anyway, he's British, so he's the British version of Quentin Tarantino, is what I like to say. But I follow him a lot on social media, and I've always admired his work and his work ethic. I've watched a lot of interviews and stuff. And like on Instagram, every month he posts all of the movies he's watched. And every month this guy watches like 50 films. Mm. And I bring this up because I'm like, I don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. And a part of me is like, well, that's what it's going to take, So it's this weird like battle between what I would like to aspire to be and what I'm feel comfortable putting in. And it's like, okay, well, it's one of, which is it? Like, you can aspire for greatness, but if you really don't feel comfortable with putting in all that stuff, then that's totally fine. And don't beat yourself up because you're not, Edgar Wright. Like, how could you be Edgar Wright? You're not putting in that kind of
right. And when you take one element of Edgar Wright's life, mm-hmm. his prowess at directing, his professional prowess, right?
Yeah.
We don't know what kind of roommate he is, or father, or husband,
1,000,000%.
son. We don't know those things, and so, the reality is that a lot of people thought Michael Jordan was kind of a douche.
Yes.
A lot of people think Larry Bird was kind of a jerk.
Yep.
And yet the admiration, the respect for and I don't know what their personal lives were like.
Yeah, you can't.
On court, off court, and so what I think that's the trap in our social media rich environment where we see people's lives and we see one dimension. We see all their travels, all the great times they're having with their kids, and we don't hear their marital arguments. We don't hear their yelling at their kids and stuff. So we set these lofty goals. I want to be like that, but I'm not willing to watch 50 movies.
Yeah.
I can value what he does. I'm glad he does it. I'm glad There's products that he's produced that I get to enjoy.
Exactly. Yeah. It's
But
hard.
I'm not sure I want to take that on. I'm not sure
I've fallen into that trap a lot, and my brain can acknowledge that it's a trap
Mhm.
of this like comparison sort of loop. But it's still very exhausting to, sometimes, some days it's the first thought that comes into my mind the moment I wake up, and it's the last thing I think about when I go to bed is you haven't done enough today. You've wasted another day. You're still this far from your goals, and like,
You're never going to make it.
yeah. And I used to have it way, way more.
How did it change?
I don't know. I think with therapy, my work with George really helped. And just, George has been really good about being like, look at the things you have done and how much joy they've brought in you, and focus on that joy that you get from what you have done. Also, too, having Haley has helped. I think having a buddy, knowing that there's stuff that exists outside of my like tunnel vision, right? She kind of pulls me out of my tunnel vision. I don't know.
Like the thing about having a buddy, having someone like a Haley, Ann Haley, who says you're not just a director to me.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that you're a successful director is great. Your vocation, that's part of who you are. But that's not the totality of who you are. I like you because of these other things.
It's hard for me to remember that, sometimes she says that and I'm like, I don't believe you. Like, how could, the other things you're listing aren't that impressive.
Mm-hmm.
To me, the only thing that's impressive is like what defines you is your success at your vocation, which is super unhealthy.
Well, but some of that is probably, my guess is some of that. You got two very successful parents, right?
Yeah.
You got a grandfather who says you're pulling down six figures, right? I mean, these tapes are in your head,
yeah,
as well. And that doesn't mean that our parents are horrible people because they set expectations or they've lived their lives in a certain way that you've looked at and said, "Wow, these are successful people."
Yeah,
I would like to emulate that. Nothing wrong with wanting to emulate success.
Yeah,
but balance. Am I a human being? A human doing? Am I a human doing?
It's tough to balance.
I am what I do.
Who you want to emulate versus who you want to be. What you want to emulate versus who you want to be. Like, I'm reading this book about Andrew Carnegie, and like, by the time he was 30 years old, he was worth, however many millions of dollars. He owned a steel mill. He does stuff. It's like, I should be like that, or I want to be like that. But then you read little bits of his person. It's like, whoa, that sucked. Like, he didn't get married until he was 50, I think. Like, he missed out on all of these years of relationship and family, and not to pass judgment, but it's like, it's just really trippy. It just sucks to have a lot of self-talk about like, here are the standards, right, of what you need to be up against. But then a part of me is like, I don't really think that I want, from what I've...
But that's if Andrew Carnegie's your standard.
Yeah. And sometimes it feels like it is. I don't know why.
Yeah, you need to figure that out.
Or Ben Franklin, it's like you read these books about these people, and you're like, well, I want to do these things. I want to be like these people. They're awesome. But
so what if you're the Andrew Carnegie to your family? What if you're what if you're the Ben Franklin to your son, or your like when kids write their essays about my hero is my dad, my hero is my mom, or
that would be trippy.
What if your sphere of influence is not world kind, humankind, but what if it's like the people that are in my orbit are going to be treated respectfully by me, and I'm gonna try and pay my bills, and I'm gonna try and
that I can control.
I can try and provide experiences for the people around me, or
And I do take a lot of like that makes me happy to think that like people in my orbit be like, yeah, I can. Alex treats me with respect. He's a nice guy. He makes me laugh. He works hard. Pays his taxes. The government's like, yeah, Alex is a great guy. He pays his taxes. Yeah. I think I there's a lot of work for me yet to be done in terms of like who I'm putting on a pedestal and why I'm putting him on a pedestal and why I feel compelled to
try to live up to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I think the question you need to be asking yourself is, how will I know when I'm content?
Yeah.
And does that mean that I stop? Like, is there a place where I arrive and I stop being Ben Franklin? You know, do I stop inventing things? Do I stop?
Mm-hmm.
Or is being the Ben Franklin, the Andrew Carnegie, is that more of a state of mind? It's like, you know, I like where I'm at. I like who I am. I like how I show
Yeah.
up.
I think if I just win one Oscar, then it'll be fine.
Yeah. Is that a serious goal?
Yeah, it is. And I don't like saying it because people are like, but yeah, I want to win an Oscar.
Well, people win them.
I know. That's what I say. But everyone's like, yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of nervous to say that on the podcast because people I know are like, you want to win an Oscar? Yeah.
It's interesting. It's like in sports teams when a team has been decimated by trades or something like that, and someone says, well, what's your goal? Well, our goal is to win the national championship.
Yeah. They're
like, really? Do you think you're going to? Well, shouldn't I have that as my goal? Shouldn't we aspire to something? So if that's the pinnacle,
yeah,
shouldn't you be aspiring to the pinnacle? I mean,
totally.
I want to stay at making $25,000 a year.
Yeah, right.
That would make me content. Just if I could make.
So right now, I feel like the Detroit Lions saying I want to win the Detroit Lions wanting to win a Super Bowl. It's kind of like what I'm afraid it sounds like. But,
yeah, but right now, the context of that statement is they're doing good and they're trending up, and they had a lousy first half of the season, and now they're being very competitive.
Yeah,
and people are very high on them.
Are they?
Yeah,
I didn't know that. I think I'm just caught in the first half, watching their Hard Knocks, being like, we're going to compete every game. Like the first 4 games, they're in.
I mean, I think it's a great metaphor because the way the sports world is talking about them in particular is that they're trending up and they're harder to beat than they were early on in the season, and they're changing a culture.
Yeah, and all great things take time, and I think it's, you know, again, it's just every year. It's like, can't look at it as one year. It's a journey.
Yeah,
and I have made a lot of progress, and I'm excited about the future, but just a lot of self-talk that I gotta work through. And
my sense is that the answer to what will make me content is going to change over your lifetime,
100%,
and that as your life circumstances change, that the response to that is going to change, and that from one year to the next, maybe it's I'm not making as much money, or maybe I'm not as, you know, but here are the things I'm really content about, and here are the things that really are bringing me happiness.
Yep. Focusing on those. I had a gratitude journal. It was like every night I tried to write 3 things that were good for my day. Mm-hmm. And that's not easy because it got to the point where I felt like I was making stuff up. Like it wasn't stuff that actually brought me joy. It's like, oh, I did well on a project. It's like, no. It's hard to be grateful for me. Optimism is a practiced habit. Or gratitude is a practiced habit. But I'm working on building those neural pathways. And I will continue to build upon that in 2023. So here's to the new year. Happy 2023, everyone.
All right.
We're going to wrap this one up. I know you got to go crush it on the pickleball courts.
That's what they say.
Serve some aces. I don't know if you can ace people in pickleball.
I have.
You have?
Yeah.
Do you serve it overhand or is it underhand?
It's always underhand.
Okay.
Yeah. Underhanded.
So do you ace them because it's like a drop shot and they can't get to it in time? Or is it's so hard it blows by them? I'm interested if it's an underhand serve.
Well, yeah. Well, you have to serve underhanded.
Yeah. How do you ace someone? Do you put topspin and?
Sometimes they just don't get to it.
Yeah, I guess so.
All right. I think it's going to go up, but it lands in.
Yeah. Well, good luck. And again, thanks for your time as always.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, everyone. Catch you later. Bye.